Hey guys, Sean here. Sorry for not posting as much over the past few weeks. Been super busy with final projects and finishing up Zoom University, but fortunately, we're done with that. So, a few weeks ago, I sat down with my friend Dylan and wanted to learn more about his story. So, the TLDR is that he went from having a 0.86 GPA at the University of Houston to being admitted to Columbia. I knew there was something really interesting about his story. So I called him over Zoom to learn more about him. I was definitely very motivated and very inspired after speaking with him. I hope you guys enjoy. This is a two-part series, so make sure you guys subscribe so that you guys are up to date for when the second part comes out.
What's up, Dylan? How are you? How's everything going?
Hey, pretty good. I mean, stuck in the house just like everybody else. Texas is reopening though. I mean, I think we've already started to reopen, so there's that. Not going outside anyways though. Too dangerous.
Yeah,
How about
no,
yourself?
that's fair. Similar situation here, just making these YouTube videos. But for the audience, could you kind of please give yourself like a brief intro, just introduce yourself in terms of like, what you study, where you're from, and what you're currently up to.
Yeah. Start from the beginning. I live in Houston, Texas. I'm currently a student studying political science at Columbia University in the city of New York. I started out going from high school. I did not have too great of a GPA. Somehow managed to get into the University of Houston studying mechanical engineering. Dropped out of that with a solid 0.86 GPA, and then went on to take a semester off just to kind of figure out myself as well as realign like my life in a sense. Then took 3-4 semesters at community college, a local community college, and then went to Harvard Extension School, and then finally to Columbia School of General Studies.
Wow, that's like quite a educational experience. Definitely something that's very non-traditional. Many people, only go to like one school for college, and here you are basically essentially going to 4 different schools. And who knows, maybe more. No, I'm just kidding. But
Like them all.
like them all, you've been through the entire experience. But something that was really interesting is the title of this video suggests, and also like what you just mentioned, is that you basically essentially went from having a 0.86 GPA to going to one of the best schools in the nation and the world. To clarify, you had a 0.86 GPA at the University of Houston. And so first of all, I think it'd be great to explain to people how that is possible, because many people don't understand what a 0.86 GPA is to begin with. But it's not something you see very often. And second, could you kind of walk through like the reasons of why this happened?
Certainly, yeah. A 0.86 GPA, what does it even mean? So most schools are graded off the 4.0 GPA scale, with an A usually equaling a 4.0, B 3.0, C 2.0. Sometimes some schools do Ds, which is 1.0, and then Fs, which is 0.0. So obviously, any math students out there, I know you're studying math as well, you can do some quick math, kind of calculate, okay, that means like maybe a lot of ones and a couple zeros. And that's not quite there. It's more like 1B and a lot of zeros. But pretty much, I didn't show up to class. I didn't turn in anything. I didn't do any work. I didn't take any exams. I didn't apply myself in any capacity to the smallest extent possible. I didn't apply anything, and resulted in a 0.86 GPA. So that's pretty much how I got there. As to what led to that path, it was a lot of personal circumstances. I was going through a lot at the time. I had a relationship that ended about the first month or two going into school. It had been going on for about 2 years and then just abruptly ended at that time. And, first relationships and whatnot, it's pretty rough to deal with them ending so abruptly. And so I really had a lot of struggles going through that. I couldn't motivate myself to do any work. And all in all, it just resulted in a 0.86 GPA.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I actually also do know a few relationships that also resulted in, bad academic performance or just bad performance at work, things like that. It's tough. It's something I don't think is uncommon. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And so eventually with the 0.86 GPA, you were academically suspended from the University of Houston, and you went to San Jacinto Community College, I believe. So first, I think it'd be interesting to understand, like, why did you not choose to go back to University of Houston following that academic suspension? Did you kind of need like a fresh start to start yourself back up in like a different environment, or what was the reasoning behind that?
So there's a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, it's, I guess, a future career slash don't take too many losses sort of decision. So the thing is that from this process, I learned that there's something called an institutional GPA as well as a cumulative GPA and all sorts of other GPAs. So an institutional GPA is a GPA that that school specifically that you're at holds onto. So at the University of Houston, I have an institutional GPA of 0.86. So if I were to transfer there back there right now, I would start out with a baseline of 0.86 of a 0.86 GPA. That's pretty tough to recover from. Like, even if I went 4.0 with all my classes up until I graduated, I would still have around a 2.5 GPA is what the math came out to. Obviously, isn't really worth it coming out of a school, working hard to get all A's straight from there on out, finish with a 2.5. It's the struggle would not be worth it at all. Secondarily, I didn't think I was ready to go back to that school yet. I still didn't think that I would be going there, or rather, I didn't think that I had the grit and the discipline to succeed at a state school or any university. So I thought that it might be necessary just to get some work in at a school nearby, at a school that's cheaper, both as a financial decision and as a practical decision for myself. Pretty much A, GPA would be really difficult to go through, and B, finances slash logistics, it was a little easier to stay at home.
Yeah, no, that does also make a lot of sense. Did University of Houston not have any sort of like freshman forgiveness policy? I know some like public universities have that, or, you know, for example, another thing that's kind of related is at MIT, we have like a pass no record for like first semester. Was there anything like that at the University of Houston, or?
So that was a thing that we tried to explore. That was an option that we definitely explored. There's like a multitude of reasons for why that didn't work for me. A, I was at the University of Houston for 3 semesters, fall 2015, spring 2016, and fall 2016. I was there for a while, and so I did not do well in a lot of classes. It wasn't just one, and it was for a while as well. When that happens, you can totally go to an advisor and ask for either a request withdrawal for medical reasons, as I was diagnosed with depression at the time. In addition to that, I actually I was diagnosed with a herniated disc in spring of 2017. I already felt a lot of back pain when I was in University of Houston. Actually, by the time it was spring 2016, by spring 2016, I had already been bedridden for a while. Like, it was really difficult to get out of bed. It was really difficult to go walk. And it didn't help that on the very first day of fall 2016, I actually somehow, on the very first school day of fall 2016, when I was trying to make a recovery, I actually somehow managed to fall off my bike and basically shredded all the skin on my left leg. And it was kind of difficult to walk, especially with a bad back. And so I was wheelchair bound for about a month. So I still struggled to go through school. But this was like a long time. It wasn't just one semester of failing or whatever. And so when I went to the advising office, one thing about depression is like, it's difficult to ask for help. It's really difficult to get out and say like, hey, look, I'm struggling. Can you help me? I didn't know who to turn to for resources, especially in the Asian stigmatization of depression and mental illnesses. Sometimes it's a little difficult to own up to that fact. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know what to do. And moreover, it was just, I wasn't motivated to do anything. I didn't want to do that. So when I went to go talk to the advisors after I had been academically suspended to see what I could do about my GPA at the University of Houston, they pretty much said, we can only allow this if you've been talking to your professors and saying like, and you can get a recommendation letter from them saying that it's okay to drop their course from GPA. And obviously, since I had never attended the class, there's no way that these professors would ever write these things for me. So I decided that it was like in my best interest not to try and go for this.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for such a comprehensive answer. Wow, there's a lot of things that I thought I knew about you, but turns out I really didn't. So no, that was great insight. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think kind of on a related note of what you did when you transferred to community college. So there are a lot of like college athletes and college students in general, that have like a bad experience in college and things like that. So like whether it's like, disciplinary issue or academic issues in your case. So do you have any insight on this? Is this something that you also saw happening a lot to a lot of people, I guess, that you interacted with? Do you have any additional insight? I know you already gave some insight beforehand on this, but any additional insight?
Are you talking specifically about people I encounter at community colleges or just in general?
I guess like kind of in community college, but also just in general, kind of just like the union of both cases.
So personally for me, I was lucky enough that I didn't have to deal. I'm lucky enough that I come from a financially sound background. Like my family my parents are willing to support me. And I'm extraordinarily thankful. And I know I'm one of the lucky few who can say that. And so I'm not entirely sure that I'm the best person to speak on this at all. But I do know that there are some people who have encountered these situations, and honestly, the best way to recover from being in that hole, in that pit, is first decide if you really want a higher education. Like, there's a lot of routes in life that don't require a higher education. Balance and check and see what's best for you, because sometimes going to college isn't the best route. And I know I've met a lot of people who recognize that fact and go on to do great things, but at a smaller, maybe not so socially laudable scale, but still, in my opinion, are doing great things for our society in general. But yeah, if you do choose to go down that route, then definitely ask for help. I think one of the biggest things that people tend not to do is go looking for administrative resources. I mean, there's a reason why our tuition is so high at these top tier universities. It's because they're paying a lot for administration. And a lot of times these administrative resources aren't being used to their full potential.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. Like, there are things that I personally have regretted from my freshman year or sophomore year, like underclassmen resources that I didn't take advantage of or I didn't know about until now. A lot of times I think in college, the resources aren't laid out in a very efficient or effective manner for students to know about. And also, it's the students' fault, also not to, be looking for those. But thank you for that. That's a great tip, I think, for any college student. So I think vast majority of people, let's say Washington's, probably haven't gone to a community college before, so they probably don't know what it's like. So could you kind of explain like your experience at community college, maybe like what type of people you met there and how you grew from that experience?
Yeah, actually, I'd have to say that going to community college probably is what set me on this path that I'm on right now. Community college was honestly, I think, a really amazing experience. And I think it was a huge turnaround for me in my personal life. So the thing is that at most universities, especially the higher level institutions, they're research institutions first. They're not really places of education so much. They're not there to be teaching you. They're there to do research. Teaching is usually a side thing for professors, right? I think a lot of us have encountered that. We have a lot of professors who are world renowned sometimes at MIT, at Columbia, Harvard. There's all sorts of amazing professors with insane CVs, but sometimes they just can't teach to save their lives. They just read off a slide or something really drab. Like I'm sure you've encountered somebody like that. Don't get me wrong, there are professors who can teach really well, but there are some that is kind of questionable. At community colleges, is not so much the case. The thing is, they don't do research. All they do is teach. They're there to teach. The most profound professor I had, his name is Professor Uman George. He completely changed my life, I think, in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. He was my physics professor. I was still trying to go down the route of STEM at the time. He just was amazing at teaching. He used like a flipped classroom style of teaching, but he did it in such a way that even students who didn't do their work outside of the classroom, like a flipped classroom demands, were able to stay on top of things for the most part. And I think every single teacher I had at San Jac were actually good at teaching, and they were actually passionate about teaching. They wanted to be a teacher first. They weren't looking for the research role. They weren't looking for the university professor's role. They were just there to teach the students. And I think having that experience, having teachers who actually cared about you learning things, I would say some of them were superior to my professors even at Columbia right now in terms of how they're able to teach. I definitely enjoyed my experience there. In terms of the people that I encountered, I'll be real with you. And if you're like trying to go far in life in terms of what the world deems as, success, then maybe the people you network with at a community college won't really get you anywhere. But I think while they're not really the connections you're looking for in terms of business, meeting and talking to them is a great way to gain perspective, especially for people who maybe in their lives, they haven't encountered that level of poverty, or not necessarily that level of poverty, but just how the other half lives in a sense. I'm going to be honest and straightforward and frank. I've been served life with, like, on a silver spoon, all that stuff. I'm really lucky. I have a roof over my head all the time, 3 meals a day, pretty much more than anybody could ask for. I was able to do pretty well at San Jac. I graduated with a solid GPA. I was in an honors program, and I had like awards given to me by professors. I had faculty awards and whatnot. And I was tutoring classmates because I'm interested in teaching. And they would always say, like, Dylan, how are you so smart? How are you able to do all this? How are you able to get good grades and whatnot? And after talking to them and knowing what their lives are like, it's not about me being smarter than them. It's not about me being harder working than them. To be honest with you, it's just about how much money we had. A lot of my classmates, they would just have to constantly work after school. The moment they finished school, they would just go and work either at their parents' restaurant or shop, maybe at lawn care services. And then they would have to just pay for things that I never had to consider, like some of them were paying off their own parents' debt, which is something that they work so hard. They spent so many hours. And so to say like, hey, Dylan, like, can you help me be as smart as you or whatever? And it's like, it's ridiculous. You're just as smart as me. I'm just luckier. that's part of why I'm interested in teaching, is because I've seen that level of inequity. I want to be able to empower people in ways that typically aren't granted to them. So I think it's a perspective when you go to a community college.
Yeah, thank you again for that very comprehensive answer. It's interesting. I think I relate to a lot what you're saying. Is like one of my examples or one of my personal experiences was when I went to the Mississippi Delta to judge like a science fair. For perspective, the Mississippi Delta is one of the poorest regions in the US. And one thing I noticed there was like, when I went to judge the projects, at face value, the projects were, not very rigorous. But then it's like, once you start understanding, what these kids go through, like most of them don't even have food on the table for dinner, or most of them like don't even have dad or a mom. When you put that in perspective that they're doing something that's optional, I found that to be extremely impressive. And that was probably actually more impressive than even like many of like the National Science Fair awards that I won in high school, all things considered. I don't know if I was in their condition, if I would have the motivation or like the intellect to even do a science fair project to begin with. So yeah, I think I totally agree with you on that one. And that was some great insight.
Absolutely.
So after kind of you spent like a year and a half, you said 3 to 4 semesters at community college. So you chose to go to Harvard Extension School rather than, let's say, normal public universities like Texas A&M or UT Austin. I'm assuming like the average student probably doesn't do that. The average student probably doesn't even know what Harvard Extension School is. So first, could you explain what Harvard Extension School is? And then could you talk about like why you chose to go there instead of going a more traditional education route?
Yes. So Harvard Extension School, it's a pretty interesting school. It's offered by Harvard University. While not completely affiliated with the university, you get a degree that's associated with Harvard. So it's pretty interesting. What happens is, first of all, to get in, actually anybody can apply to the school. There's no like GPA requirement, nothing. What happens is instead you take 1 semester with them, or rather 3 courses. There's 2 required courses specifically, and then 1 of your optional elective course. After taking those 3 courses, they'll accept you into their program or not. I called it an application semester. That's not their jargon, but it's easier to say it that way than explain it in a convoluted way that it is. So you take those 3 courses, 1 writing course, 1 math course, and then 1 course of your choice. And then they accept you based off of performance. There, it's an extension school. So an extension school, you could liken it to a night school. It's not as prestigious as Harvard. You're not always getting a Harvard education in terms of the professors. Not all of them are from Harvard. Some of them are from schools nearby. Some of them are from online schools, because most of Harvard Extension is online. The degrees you get are a little strange as well. They're called Bachelors of Liberal Arts in Extension Studies with a specialization in whatever you chose a specialization in. So it's really convoluted and kind of maybe not so prestigious, and pretty clearly not prestigious to a lot of people when they're seeing these degrees. I'm not saying that they're a bad school, but it's not always the best option to make. There are a lot more details to it, and I'm not sure that this interview is the best place to disclose all that information. I definitely have a couple online resources that kind of explain it a lot better and are more well thought out than me on the fly listing things. But more or less, it's basically an online school that caters to people who are coming from more non-traditional backgrounds with an online first 1 semester application course. So as to why I chose this program versus going to any traditional university. So first of all, I graduated from San Jac in the winter of 2018. With that in mind, a lot of schools don't really accept transfers from the winter semester into the spring semester, especially because I was considering a mechanical engineering degree at the time. And the programs usually have set courses that you take, especially as an engineer, with prerequisites and whatnot. And so all the programs start in the fall. So that wasn't really an option for me to go to any normal school in the area. And so instead, I just spent that semester there. It was actually a little cheaper than most would expect. It cost me about $6,000 total for one semester there, taking 12 credit hours. So it's not too bad. I guess it was a way for me to kind of figure things out because I could stay at home. I had a lot more time because it was online at the time, and just figure out what exactly I wanted to do, as well as consider my options for the upcoming fall semester.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. In a way, I've heard this kind of idea thrown around. So I know, for example, a lot of students who are applying from college from Saudi Arabia, for example, they want to have like, let's say, a gap year or what they call a foundation year. And it seems like Harvard Extension is kind of like that, whereas like you get an education, but it's also a way to kind of build up skills, like maybe build up your resume for kind of that time buffer for applying to a new college, if I understand correctly.
It can actually give you a degree as well. It does have a degree granting program, just to be clear.
Okay, that makes sense. But it seems that a lot of people also just use it as a buffer as well, right? It kind of works both ways, right? Or
I don't think, actually, I think that I'm one of the few who got accepted and didn't actually take it. I don't think it's as common for you to take one semester and then just leave it.
oh,
And
interesting.
actually, I
Okay.
was going down that route. Yeah.
Okay,
I was,
okay. Gotcha. Oh, okay. So when you're saying this is more about like your decision versus like a generalization.
right.
Gotcha.
The general decision would probably be to stick with it because it is still a pretty good program. You're still getting access to Harvard resources. Like I had a Harvard account, so we could access Hollis, all their online libraries. So it was pretty nice, but it wasn't quite where I wanted to be. And it was a little difficult. There were some logistical issues for me personally that made me decide against it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. The Harvard name. Yeah. No. So that I think that leads into like another question I had was something along the lines of. So it seems like you were motivated to do more than Harvard Extension School. You wanted to go even farther, right? So I'm just curious, did you get that motivation while you were at Harvard Extension School, or did you already have that starting from at San Jack? Yeah, kind of talk about the process of how you gained that motivation and who in your life really helped you do that, or was this all just like kind of self-motivation?
So first, I think it should be noted that I didn't think I would go anywhere in life after getting a 0.86 GPA. It's pretty difficult to consider that as an option to be anything more than, hey, I'll just get a degree like from some state school, or even like just get a degree at a community college and be done with it. Get a 2 degree, try to do as much as I can with my life. That's it. It was hard to imagine anything more than that. And so I actually got a random email that said like, oh, Harvard Extension School. And that was like the first spark. That was like, oh, there are programs out there for non-traditional people like myself. What could that entail for me? And so I explored those routes. And so that kind of opened my eyes to what was out there in the world, almost like a crutch to get me back up to where I could have been. So that motivation came from there, as well as, if I'm being honest with you, I didn't even think I'd be accepted to any state schools. No reasonable person in their right mind would accept somebody with a GPA that's below a 1. It's not in favor of the admissions office or that school's reputation to have students who have sub 1 GPAs. And so what made my decision? Yes, because I felt like I had been left behind in the education system. To be forward with you, when I was in high school, middle school, beginning of high school, in all of middle school and all of elementary school, I was academically very strong. I was always the all A kid, without effortlessly all A, like I could go into class without doing my homework or studying, whatever, get the hundreds on math tests, no problem, that Asian kid. But that all fell apart in sophomore year of high school. Failed my first test with a solid 38 on my iconics pre-calculus course. That's right. I still remember that. And from there, things just kind of spiraled downwards. I received the first time in my life a B and then a C. After getting my first C in math, I got a C in chemistry, and then I got C's in basically all my classes in high school. So yeah, things really plummeted from where my high ivory tower all the way to C's and whatnot. I never really expected myself to amount to much. I realized then that I felt like I was left behind by the education system. Like, hey, look, I was a promising young student at the time, once upon a time, and then here I am now. What happened? And so I'm really passionate about education. I really want to eventually go into education, like policy, maybe even reform our education system in general. That's something I'm definitely looking into, and part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now, political science and statistics at Columbia. And so that kind of drove me. And I realized, like, if I ever want to be in that world of politics, in that, Game of Thrones, basically, I need some sort of reputation to back me up. That's part of why I chose a prestigious school over going to a state school or something else.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I guess another thing was kind of if you could add on is like, so during what stage of the process did you become more motivated to, pursue these high goals? I know you said after like 0.86 GPA, that's probably like the low point of your life, right? Was it at San Jack or at Harvard Extension School where you started developing that motivation? It's like, I can climb myself out of this. Like I can make it back up. And, could you talk about that process and how you got that motivation?
I think it was definitely at San Jack. The story that I cite for myself, the anecdote that I usually cite is I actually formed a study group for my differential equations course at San Jack at the time. It was a very small class because most people don't take differential equations at a community college. It's not a thing you really do. But there was a couple of us, maybe less than 10. And there was one girl in that class who I would say is the main motivating factor for everything I did in community college, or why I pushed beyond community college, and not in the way that you would expect. So she was probably the most demotivating person I ever met in my life. She was super depressing. We would do problem sets together, and we would do maybe one question, and then she'd be like, okay, I need to leave. I need to get a smoke. And she never contributed to these problem sets. She simply sat there on her phone, I don't know, texting or Snapchatting, whatever it was. And then at the end, when we solved it, she would ask for the solution, write it on her homework, and be done with it. The worst part of it all was that she said she wanted to be a teacher. And she told us, yeah, I want to be a teacher because it's good money, it's easy. I was almost, I would say, disgusted by that fact, that she wanted to be a teacher for students because A, it was easy, and B, it made money. So obviously, first of all, she got her facts wrong. B, if she ever became a teacher, I would feel terribly for her students. I would not want her to be a teacher at all. And so part of why I initially said, hey, I want to be a teacher, was basically, I want to be the yin to her yang. I want to cancel her out, evil in this world, by being a good teacher. And so that pretty much kicked me into high gear. And then when I started thinking about it, like, hey, actually being a teacher would be great, but what if I could make a greater impact? What if I could go into legislation? What if I could go into changing things, how this works for our entire country, not just one classroom? And when I thought about that way, it highly motivated me to just get out there and go and help people who I thought maybe could be left behind just like me. So in a sense, it's I think that I could do good for a lot of people. And so I'm kind of motivated by the fact of helping others. To be completely straightforward with you, I'm not motivated to further myself. Even in high school, I never really did my own homework, as I established. But even when I was in the throes of just not doing anything at all, I would still do any group projects, any lab groups that I was in. I would do my part and more. I would go above and beyond for my groups, because I realized hey, whatever I do is on me, but if those people are counting on me, then I need to do my part at the very least. And so I did my part for every group project because I wanted to serve others in a sense, but I never really cared for my own stuff. And so a lot of my motivation comes from helping others over anything else. And so with that in mind, going into teaching and whatnot, I think is probably one of the best ways to serve others. And so that's why I'm kind of going down that route now.
Yeah, no, that seems like a very noble cause. And in some aspects, I would say personally, I do relate to that as well. In the sense that I think eventually at a certain point in my life, I want to really spend a lot of effort giving back, whether it's through my future ventures or whether it's through projects that I work on and things like that. One point to clarify, you said you don't really want to further yourself. My assumption of what you meant by that statement is that you want to still continuously learn about how educational policy is, because obviously I don't think any of us completely understand it. But when you mean by furthering yourself, it's maybe it doesn't matter to you as much that you develop, for example, certain specific technical skills, because those may not help you become a better teacher. Or could you kind of clarify what you meant by that?
No, yeah, it's purely just I'm not there to gain financially from myself. I'm there to just I'm trying to be the best teacher I can be, the best legislator, whatever, best representative for people. So, but I don't have any financial stake in this. I'm not there to try and promote my own self-interest, because I don't really have too many. My self-interest is to help others. So it's a little strange that I guess promoting my self-interest is to help others. So I guess maybe I am being selfish in some sense, but it's a strange version of selfishness. But anyways, that's philosophical. The idea is, yeah, I'm definitely more interested in just trying to promote the interests of others, trying to do what is best for them, not really caring for what is best for myself.
Yeah, totally. I totally see that. And I really like that. I personally respect it a lot. Maybe it's because it's kind of what I personally aspire to be. I feel too many people nowadays are too focused on their personal self-interest. But yeah, no, that's a fair point. It's your selfish personal interest is just different from other people. But I respect that a lot. In a sense, it's you're sacrificing. It's awesome. I love that.